Shalom. We turn now to Psalm 41. For the leader, a psalm of David. Happy is he who is thoughtful of the wretched. In bad times, may the Lord keep him from harm. May the Lord guard him and preserve him, and may he be thought happy in the land. Do not subject him to the will of his enemies. The Lord will sustain him on his sickbed. You shall wholly transform his bed of suffering. I said, O Lord, have mercy on me, heal me, for I have sinned against you. My enemies speak evilly of me. When will he die and his name perish? If one comes to visit, he speaks falsely. His mind stores up evil thoughts. Once outside, he speaks them. All my enemies whisper together against me, imagining the worst for me. Something baneful has settled in him. He'll not rise from his bed again. My ally in whom I trusted, even he who shares my bed, has been utterly false to me. But you, O Lord, have mercy on me. Let me rise again and repay them. Then shall I know that you are pleased with me, when my enemy cannot shout in triumph over me. You will support me because of my integrity. Let me abide in your presence forever. Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, from eternity to eternity. Amen and amen. Psalmist begins with a reflection on the kind of person who thinks of the plight of the wretched, of the downtrodden. I have spoken earlier in comments to previous Psalms about how Judaism tends to take the side of the underdog. And the psalm here is certainly no exception to the idea that we take the side of the downtrodden, we empathize with the wretched, and anyone who is thoughtful of the downtrodden will be able to find happiness. God willing, that person will be kept from harm. However, that's not the way life works, as we know. All the good things that we do simply because they are good. We try to be helpful and kind to others. We try to empathize with those who are downtrodden because simply that is the right thing to do. We do not do so out of expectation of immediate reward or gratification. And in fact, we can wind up getting sick. We can wind up suffering from misfortunes ourselves. The psalmist says God will sustain the one who empathizes with the downtrodden on his sickbed. So when he is sick, God will be with him by his side. God will take care of him. God will protect him. And then the psalmist moves to an idea that I'm sure we are all familiar with, and that is the difference between our friends, our true friends, and our false friends, and our enemies. There is a statement well known in the Godfather movies: keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. The psalmist mentions here that his enemies speak evilly of him, praying and hoping for his early death. But he also then shifts to this theme. If one comes to visit, and maybe he's talking about being on his sickbed, and somebody comes to fulfill the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, of visiting the sick, and when he comes to visit, he puts on a false demeanor, and he even speaks falsely in his words. He is deceptive. His mind stores up evil thoughts. And once he leaves the person's house, once the visit is over, the false friend goes out and says whatever is truly on his mind. In a way, he stabs his, quote, friend in the back. He means harm for him, and he is two-faced. My ally in whom I trusted, even he who shares my bread, has been utterly false to me. People that have broken bread with the psalmist, who have shared food at his table, who have been with him during times of celebration and joy, and perhaps during times of sadness and sorrow. People appear or feign a closeness that really isn't genuine. Then they go out and they behave falsely. In other words, they cannot be relied upon. They are undependable. In contrast, we have the psalmist's relationship to God. The psalmist identifies with God because he identifies with the downtrodden. He cares for those who are suffering. And in that sense, he connects with God, who is the ultimate caregiver, the ultimate being who loves and cares and supports the most those who are suffering on any level. And the psalmist aspires to be that way, to imitate and to follow God's ways in that respect. And so we have a contrast between the unreliability and the lack of dependability of the false friends, as opposed to the reliability and steadfast nature of God. God is the being to whom we can always depend on. God is the being who is always there by our side, who cannot be false in any way to us. Even though we might do all sorts of good things in our lives, and even though we may wind up suffering or lying on our sickbed, or afflicted with this terrible coronavirus, or have someone in our family who is infected with this disease, even though we may be suffering in our personal, family, and economic lives, though we may have lost our jobs, though we may have loved ones who have lost their jobs, who don't know where their next paycheck is coming from, even though we may be enduring these hardships, even so, we continue to practice acts of goodness and kindness, because that's what God would want of us, because that is what is in God's nature. The things of this world are transitory, they change, they shift all the time. The only force and being we can truly depend upon to be immutable, to be there forever, unchanging in this being's love and care for us, that being is God. And that is why the psalmist ends, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, may ha'olam ad ha'olam," from eternity to eternity, forever and ever, from the beginning of time till the end of time, through infinity, God is, has always been, and always will be, the Hebrew word baruch, blessed. Holding on to that idea of God's eternal nature, connecting it through our own breath, our neshama, our breathing, knowing that when we focus on our breath, that phenomenon that we can always rely on and always depend upon, that spiritual force within us, as long as we are alive, this is what gives us hope. This is what gives us strength. So put aside the falsehood, put aside the angst and anxiety and anger and frustration we have towards other people whom we cannot rely on, who are false to us, who we cannot depend on, those enemies who masquerade as friends. Put that aside. Do not focus on that, but instead focus on the spirit within and on our eternal love and devotion to the eternal God. Thank you.